Hi, good afternoon. I'm Jeremy Love, and thank you very much for joining this special edition of Immigration Live Chat called Conversation Without Borders. We're here at the Love Law Firm today. I have my paralegal, Julie Hand, with us today. And here at the Love Law Firm, we only handle immigration cases. And today we're going to discuss options for unaccompanied children, what's happening at the border, as well as options going forward, and try to cover that as best as we can. This conversation is in English. We'll do another one in about 30 minutes in Spanish. Esta conversación está en inglés. Vamos a hacer otra en español en como 30 minutos. Well, thank you again so much for joining us today, and we'll do our best to cover this topic. And feel free to send us by email or on Facebook right here. You can send us a message, ask any questions, and we'll try to answer them here live or right afterwards when we're done.
Yeah. So, like you said, we're going to talk a little bit about unaccompanied minors. So right now we've been hearing a lot about the immigration crisis that's going on at the border. So what can you tell us about what's actually happening there? Where are people coming here from?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very important topic today, and that's why we wanted to make sure to cover this topic for you. So there's a lot of people who have been coming to the southern border of the U.S. with Mexico due to violence and also economic crisis in Central America and Mexico. So we've seen a lot of people from Mexico, Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras specifically. But something a lot of people don't know is that the numbers have actually been steadily going down since 2014.
Okay. So what's happening to the people who are coming here? What's happening to them at the border?
Yeah, well, as we've seen over with different presidents and different immigration officers, we've had a number of different policies as far as what happens with families at the border. At times, families weren't separated; they were kept together. But lately, we've seen more and more instances of children being separated and being put in conditions that are really, really difficult. But sometimes people are moved around. It's hard to know, and when people are separated like that, it makes it very difficult. And one thing with undocumented immigrants is that unlike U.S. citizens, they don't have the right to a court-appointed attorney. Now, they can get an attorney, but they have to pay for it, and they have to find someone on their own. And that's difficult when family members are being separated.
Right.
And so as far as specifically what's happening at the border, if someone is coming to the U.S. from Mexico, for example, and they're stopped at the border without a visa, they do something that's often called catch and release. So the person will be fingerprinted and then taken back to Mexico in a matter of hours. Now, if the person is not from Mexico, if they're from Central America, for example, and they show a credible fear of returning to their home country, then what happens is they're giving the opportunity to be admitted into the U.S. to request asylum. And we'll discuss more about asylum in a moment. But that's what happens with someone who's not from Mexico, for example. And with children, they also have the option to file for something that's called Special Immigrant Juvenile Status, or SIJS, and we'll cover that in just a second too.
Okay, so the unaccompanied children that are coming here, what happens right after they enter? Where are they being detained?
Yeah, so one thing about children is that they're not always housed in the same places as their parents. So they're actually in the jurisdiction of the Office of Refugee and Resettlement, and they're taken from the border to shelters, usually in the state that they're stopped in, whether it be Texas or Arizona, and for example. And then they have an interview process there as well as a medical exam. And then the Office of Refugee and Resettlement tries to contact a relative that they have here in the U.S. to be their sponsor. And this person is in charge of food and clothing and housing the child here in the U.S. So they'll be sent to live with that relative if they have a relative here in the U.S.
Okay, so once they're here, what options do they have, to be able to stay?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And so if they're given a notice to appear in court, and eventually they will receive a court date in immigration court. But one thing that they're able to do, that everyone in the U.S. who has fear of returning to their home country, is to request asylum. And asylum basically is an option for someone who has fear of returning to their home country for persecution. And that persecution has to be something specific to that person, whether it be race, religion, political opinion, for example. are reasons why someone could file for asylum. The other option I mentioned for children is the SIJS, Special Immigrant Juvenile Status, which is an option for kids who have been abandoned, abused, or neglected by at least one of their parents. So there's a several stage process to that, but that's what the option is for SIJS. And so they have to show, there's a number of steps to it. One of them is before they turn 18 in Alabama, for example, they can request dependency. And so dependency is basically they are dependent on their relative who's here in the U.S., often a sibling or an aunt or uncle, that kind of thing. And they can get a dependency order here in Alabama. If they're under 19, they're eligible for guardianship. And then they have to file, once that's all approved, they have to file a petition before turning 21. But they also have the immigration court aspect of it. So they have to, in the meantime, have an attorney to represent them in immigration court. So it's complicated, but like asylum, it is a path to permanent residence.
Okay. And just to clarify a little bit, so when we say unaccompanied children, is that only for children that come here completely alone? With one parent?
Yeah, that's a great question with a very complicated answer, but it's this one I get a lot. So according to immigration, the child just has to show that they were abandoned, abused, or neglected by at least one parent. Now, sometimes that's just the parent wasn't able to provide for them, and so they left because of the financial situation. But sometimes they come here with one of their parents. Let's say they were abandoned by their father, and they come here with their mother, for example. According to immigration, yes, they are eligible for SIJS. But according to Alabama, it's more difficult because the courts don't like to find someone dependent when they do have a parent here. So it's complicated. There are other options that you can pursue as far as family court goes, but it's complicated. That's why you need to have an attorney with experience in this type of immigration case.
All right.
Great. Any news or updates, or have we could check real quick to see if we have any questions, and if we don't, we'll make sure to respond to any questions you have right here on Facebook. Otra vez vamos a regresar en un momento en español también.
Okay. I don't think we have any questions.
Okay.
So.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Feel free to let us know if you have any questions. Again, my name is Jeremy Love. Julie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
And we're here. If you have any questions, feel free to check out our website to loveimmigration.com. There's a lot of great information there, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks.